What up, everybody? It's your boy Kentario, and I'm back again for another episode of Christ and Commonwealth. And today we are doing a reaction video to the first episode of Disney Plus's Ms. Marvel. And I must say that after watching the first episode, that I am actually surprised at how much I really like the show. Especially after reading some of the origin story of Kamala Khan, which is the name of our hero, Ms. Marvel. And I definitely can tell you that for anybody that loves superheroes or loves a reflection of what it's like to be a fan of a superhero in a TV show, this show, Ms. Marvel, actually captures what that feeling is like. Getting caught up in your imagination, imagining what it would be for you yourself to be a hero, experiencing that in this day and time, even to illustrate that in the show, is what was epically captured in my personal opinion. Even more so, the show does a magnificent job of making sure to keep a high level of consistency as far as the origin goes with Kamala Khan versus doing something of their very own, as well as having changes of powers that she possesses, as we've seen earlier on in the previews for what we're expecting out of the TV show. Before we get into what we've seen in the first episode, let's talk about what actually takes place in the origin. So you are of course introduced to Kamala Khan, who is a Muslim American young woman, and of course her family, though they are of course very committed to their religious beliefs, they are also somewhat progressive. There are some leniencies that they're willing to partake in. For example, one of the things that you already are introduced to with Kamala Khan's character is that she is not required to wear a hijab by her family. Even more so, she's allowed to go out in public without wearing one. However, there is a high level of respect on her part for her religion and her belief system, some of which the stories that her families have shared with her about what they believe and stand for is actually something that plays a huge part in where she is a fan of superheroes as well. So that being reflected in her stems from her religious beliefs, which is something, if you've been following me for a while here on Christ and Comics, that's what I stand for. My belief in Jesus Christ, as I've been brought up in the Bible and being brought up in the Word, seeing the characters in the Bible do these amazing things in the name of the Lord, witnessing superhero behavior in Marvel Comics, DC, anime, and manga, those types of things, really just brings me back to my faith even more. And so to see that being reflected with Kamala, as well as with her Muslim faith, seeing that within superheroes, that connection, I already have that with this character, so I'm loving that right off the bat. But you see that wrestling of relationship with, just having a personal relationship with her family versus, just being under their thumb. Yes, they are progressive, but they still hold to their belief system and want her to do the same. Now, you also see with her going to school that although she is disconnected when she's going into her fantasy realm, she has a lot of people that she interacts with and friends. But you find out that she really only has two friends, which is another young Muslim woman, Muslim girl, as well as her best friend, Bruno. Now, Bruno, being an Italian character, has a lot of, a lot of love for Kamala as a person, even more so is willing to back her as far as what her religious beliefs are, which is something that you see later on in the story. And here's where that consistency continues from what we get in the show versus the comic book, is she's been invited to a party that of course her parents aren't down for her going to. We don't want you acting like the rest of them, going out and drinking and doing these things, and we want you to stay home and behave. Don't become like them. Be true to who you are. But what we're realizing within this story is that she is coming into herself, right? Valuing who she is as a person. Even with her fandom to superheroes, she is obsessed with Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel. And she wants to be more like her versus being more like herself, which we'll see a little bit more of. But long story short, she ends up sneaking out and going to this party. And in this party, she is, and from a religious standpoint, disrespected, tricked into drinking alcohol, which is something that she doesn't partake of as far as what she believes. And so she's realizing that the people she thought cared about her and were her friends really weren't. And in the midst of her leaving this party, Terrigen mist comes across the city of New Jersey where she's from. And this Terrigen mist, which is something that Black Bolt, who is an Inhuman, which we've seen in Multiverse of Madness. He's an Inhuman, Black Bolt. He released this Terrigen Mist across the world, and anyone with an Inhuman gene within them is triggered to, of course, activate their powers, which is what happened to Kamala Khan. She ends up in this cocoon-like state, ends up having an inner dialogue with, you know, that warfare that we talk about, that she struggles with, you know, who she is with her friends versus who she is with her parents, you know, believing what it is that her parents have taught her, but wanting to come into who she is by having this dialogue with Iron Man, Captain Marvel, as well as Captain America, to come, again, to value what she's been taught, but also to come into herself. Now, once she emerges from what it looks like is this cocoon-like thing, she comes out changed into the old school Captain Marvel, when she's wearing her black suit, which is more like a one-piece bathing suit with a scarf wrapped around her waist. She comes out looking exactly like her. This reveals that her powers consist of being able to shapeshift. But not only that, is she able to also stretch and operate similar to that of Ant-Man, being that she can increase and decrease her size. She can focus those same abilities simply to like her hands and her feet, or her head or her body, versus doing just the whole thing entirely. So these are the abilities that she's acquired due to the Terrigen Mist, revealing that she herself is an Inhuman. Now, this goes forward to her going forward to do her very first heroic act, which is saving her friend Zoe from what looks like to be an attempted assault on her from another drunk student who seems to come across as a jock. And as Zoe's being assaulted, as we can interpret, she falls into what looks like a river or a creek and begins to drown. And here comes what looks like Captain Marvel, but is actually Kamala Khan, reaching into the water, increasing the size of her hand, and pulling Zoe up out of danger, and ends up running away, thus discovering that she herself has these powers. Now, this reflects a lot of what we already simply get from the very first episode of Miss Marvel here on Disney+. She is a young lady caught up in fantasy, and they do a great job of illustrating this young lady being caught up in fantasy by you experiencing what it is she's fantasizing about. So much so that she is a young lady that has started her own YouTube channel. It's either called Sloth Baby or Baby Sloth. What? But on this YouTube channel, she tells her own stories. She expresses her obsession with superheroes, especially Captain Marvel, and how she would like to be like her. Even going as far as exaggerating the way that Endgame went by saying that Captain Marvel knocked out Thanos, when that wasn't necessarily the case. We know how that went, right, guys? But anyway, we get introduced to that. But we also get introduced to, again, like I said, what it's like with her parents and her family. She has an older brother as well as her mother and father who are in her life. And we see that progressive nature there in the very beginning of the episode, where you have the older brother praying over his food unto Allah, but at the same time the dad's in the background saying, boy, if you keep praying like this, you're never going to eat. So we see this lax behavior coming off of a Muslim father versus him being so strict and hard pressed about obeying the faith, right? We see more of that in the character of the brother than we do from even the mother and the father in some sense. So the focal point of the episode is that Kamala is excited, being that a Comic-Con is taking place here in New Jersey. Now, we can't say how many Comic-Cons they've had since Endgame has taken place, but we can, I guess you could say, summarize, this is probably one of the first ones that they're having around the world after what's taken place with the hero saving everybody. So she's getting excited about going to this Comic-Con, which is, again, when I say that this episode allows for us as fans to connect with Kamala, that's what we're experiencing. The excitement of being able to go to a convention, dressing up as your favorite character or favorite superhero, participating in all the fun games, getting into the costume contest, all of these things is what Kamala's excited about. But it becomes evident in school that she is overly distracted by this fantasy of what this is going to be like. Even more so, the guidance counselor has called her in to address her for this behavior, seeing what we can do to help prepare you for the future, get back to reality versus getting caught up in your fantasies. You need to start focusing on what life is going to be like, because it's not going to be a fantasy any longer. And so we see that taking place. But anyway, she's getting prepared to go to this convention. At the same time, and getting prepared for this, we meet with what we met in the comic book, where she is objected of this adventure by her parents. Now, here's where things get interesting, right? Although they were objective immediately in the comic book, we see that the parents are at least trying in the TV show. Because where they originally weren't for it, her big brother goes to speak to them on her behalf, and they come in and say, hey, we'll let you go, but not only will we let you go, your dad's going to go with you.
No, God!
You'll be Little Hulk, and your dad will be Big Hulk. I mean, Dad went all in.
No, God, please, no!
Painting his face for this girl, to show his excitement, to show his support for his daughter. That's the character of the father. When I tell you that I love this dad in this show, this dad is A1 steak sauce. Her dad is awesome. But she's embarrassed by this, and she expresses that embarrassment, and that really breaks the heart of her parents, breaks the heart of the father, and results in her not being able to go to the convention.
No!
And this is what we get, right? We get a play on fantasy versus reality, where she imagines this mega plan of sneaking out, deceiving her parents, going to the convention, and getting back just in time so that she's not caught. However, just as we go into what really takes place, she jumps out the window and hurts herself. She's late getting to the bus. They missed the first one, and then they almost missed the second one. When they get on the bus, she loses her bike. And then they finally get to the convention. Now, she learned to sew so that she could create her own Carol Danvers outfit. And in going to this convention, we are introduced a little bit more to the character of Zoe at this point, where we find out that Zoe is there. And Zoe even dresses up as Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel. Now, here's the thing with that, is when we see Zoe in the beginning at school, she seems as though like that popular girl, the cool girl, the pretty girl, and her and Kamala aren't like necessarily seeing eye to eye. She's this cool girl and I'm just down here. Why would she be here? Like, she hated seeing her at this convention. And then she's wearing more of the one piece, but the blue, gold, and red colors, while Kamala is wearing the full-on suit with the mask and everything, the full body suit instead. And so she's worried, of course, how this event is going to go. Am I going to win the costume contest? All of this. These are all the things going through her head. But she enters in anyway. So she goes to prepare to, show off her costume. Now, I need to pause and go ahead and point this out, that her mother brings home this box of course, a bunch of trinkets and jewelry from her grandmother, and she finds this bracelet, which is of course snatched away by the mom, and we later see that she brings this bracelet with her to kind of bring her own individuality to her suit. So once she puts on the bracelet, it triggers the powers of the bracelet, causing like this aura-like crystallized energy to form all around her body. And she, in this moment, is the only one seeing this. So it's like, while you're sitting there watching it, it's like, anybody else seeing this energy come over this girl's body right now? And nobody notices. Not even her best friend Bruno, who is here. And so she goes on stage. She goes to show off her costume. But in the midst of showing off her costume, the powers from this bracelet are triggered. Now, when she goes to reach out her hand, this energy or crystallized clouds, I guess you could say, appears over the audience. And they're seeing her doing this and recording it. And they're amazed. And this is really hyping up the crowd for her. And you're like, oh my God, Kamala's gonna win the contest, right? You're getting excited for this girl who didn't think she had anything to bring to the table. But she's showing off and owning it. But she ends up, her powers go a little bit ragged and causes a bit of destruction. And everyone starts to freak out and run away and things. And Zoe, seeing her use her powers, cuts in front of her, ends up getting hit by what looks like a pinata version of Thor's hammer. It swings down and hits Zoe just as Kamala is dodging. And after she's getting hit, she's swung up in the air, falls from the sky, and then Kamala conjures a hand construct to come and catch her before she hits the ground, saving Zoe's life. But as they go to leave from the convention, like I said, just as she fantasized she'd be home on time, she ends up getting home late, and her mother catches her. And her mother, of course, gives her that speech. You need to be more like you. You're acting like them. Going out and staying out late, I don't even know who you are. You need to find out who you are. And in some sense, you're like feeling Kamala. You're like, hey, she does know who she is. This is who she wants to be. She wants to be a hero. She wants to be like Carol Danvers. She wants to be, express herself and live out those fantasies versus hiding them and pushing them away and becoming a robot-like reality, or even worse, just simply doing what her parent says and being just that obedient child and not having any identity of her own. And so you start to really feel that. But that is the first episode of Miss Marvel. Now, if I had a couple of things to say about what you're introduced to, when I tell you that the powers that she gets is the least of your worries, it is the least of your worries. Because the most amazing thing about everything is how it flows so well with taking what we get from the origin story and modernizing it to what it is, to what it would be like in today's time. Children of today would really relate with Kamala, and that's what they did so well with this, is not completely ruining the origin story. So you could forget about what you see with the powers, but that relationship that you're easily able to build with Kamala is probably one of the most beautiful things about the show, and then that's one of the things that I enjoyed. Now, one of the things that they kind of did change up, which is not bad, is they went from it being a focus of the religious beliefs. In the comic book, you get more of simply, this is how we function as a family and as a people, being that we're from Pakistan. They don't really speak of her being Muslim as much as they speak of her being a Pakistani American young woman. That's the focus. I ponder that personally, but that's the focus. And you get more of the parents being lax versus being hard pressed. They are concerned with their daughter being like everybody else, but they really demonstrate, even in the beginning of the episode, that they're more for backing her and supporting her. One instance is she went to go do a driving test, and in the midst of doing the driving test, she fantasizes about doing well, but she ends up actually backing into the driving teacher's car. And when the parents go to pick her up, they're fussing at the driver like it's his fault versus getting on to her about any of it. Even more so, right? Like I said, the parents are trying to support her by, hey, you'll let you go to the convention. We'll go, like your dad will even go with you, right? Like we see that. We see the dad where the mom tries to fuss at certain points. Back their daughter is saying, hey, don't do her like that. Like trying to support her a little bit more. We see a lot of that within the show. And that's something that I like, is the attempt on the parents' part to support their daughter. Like that, I thought that was truly beautiful. But we see, again, the struggle of being a young teenager trying to come into yourself without completely running from what your parents have taught you, but balance becoming who I am and doing what my parents have taught me to do. That's the struggle that we see with Kamala. And dare I say, as we draw this video to a close, this was actually a different version of what we get in Turning Red. Right?
What do you mean by that?
Right? The way that May wants to be her own individual person, but also loves what she has with her family, but at the same time is not able to be herself with her family. So you see that struggle in Turning Red. We get that same struggle with Kamala here in Miss Marvel. And it's going to be exciting to see how this story goes, especially how much will they actually stick to what takes place in the comic. Last thing to hit on is we get a post-credit scene at the end that shows two people, which seem like police officers or detectives, finding the video where Kamala is using her powers. And in demonstrating Kamala using her powers, they're like, oh wait, we need to get to her, we need to pick her up. Now you're given this vibe of S.H.I.E.L.D. almost. Like, okay, so what are they about to do? Is this a team that's going to be bringing her in to go towards the Marvels movie that's supposed to be coming out in 2023? Or is this going to be catering more towards the Young Avengers, which we are getting a lot of, hints to with all of the young heroes that we have coming through already. For example, Kate Bishop. So are we leaning more towards that, or are we leaning more towards the Marvels? Who knows? But this seems like a miniature version of S.H.I.E.L.D. This is a great start to the series, if I do say so myself. Anybody that's disliking it and saying it's just another Disney Channel show, you're really missing the point. You're missing the message, and you're missing out on an impact. But I want you guys to tune in, because we're going to be doing the entirety of the series, doing reactions to each episode. And then at the end, we're going to do a full-on video doing a review of the series and giving a Christian's perspective as to whether or not Christians could or should even watch Miss Marvel. Thank you guys so very much, and make sure that you hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button, and if you have any feedback for what you're seeing, make sure that you leave a comment and let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys, and have a blessed one.